My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Standing at the podium of MIT's main auditorium with 3,000 faces looking up at me, I should have been focused on the speech I was about to give. The speech that had taken me weeks to prepare. The speech that would be broadcast live to millions. But all I could feel was that relentless vibration against my hip message after message lighting up the screen. I glanced down. Mom! The preview flashed across the lock screen before disappearing. Then another. Dad. Then one more. Aurora. My family. The family I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. The family who had my new number for exactly 30 minutes, who I'd blocked and rerouted and avoided with the precision of someone who had made it an art form. They were all texting me. Right now. All of them after years of nothing. The messages kept coming. I didn't need to read them to know what they said. Some variation of please and talk to us and we're your family. The words they should have said 5 years ago. The words that would have mattered then. But not now, because they weren't just texting. According to the preview of my mother's last message, they were here. In this building. Waiting in the lobby outside this auditorium. And suddenly, I understood exactly why they had tracked me down, why they had shown up unannounced, why after 5 years of perfect silence they were desperate to see me. They had finally realized what they'd lost, or more accurately, they had finally realized that everyone else had too. I stood at the podium in front of 3,000 people cameras broadcasting live to millions more online, and I had exactly 60 seconds to make a choice. Walk off this stage and give them what they wanted, or do what they did to me 5 years ago. Leave them waiting. Leave them watching from the sidelines. Leave them to finally understand what it feels like to be invisible. My finger hovered over the power button. One tap, and their messages would stop. One decision, and I could end this chapter forever. 3,000 people were watching me, waiting for me to speak. But all I could think about was that empty seat at my graduation. The one moment I needed them and they chose a party over me. I powered off the phone, dropped it in my bag, and smiled at the audience. Not a warm smile. Not a forgiving one. This was the smile of someone who had just chosen herself, again. Because 5 years ago, they made their choice. Today, I was making mine. If you're here listening to my story, wondering how I got to this moment of sweet poetic justice, hit that like button and subscribe, because this is a journey you won't want to miss. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to choose yourself over people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Because that's exactly what I did. And let me tell you, it was the best decision of my entire life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. 5 years ago, I was a completely different person. At 24, I was the invisible daughter, the one who studied too much, cared too little about social climbing, and had the audacity to pursue artificial intelligence research instead of finding a wealthy husband. My family, the Blackwoods, were old money. Not the kind that flaunted wealth obnoxiously, but the kind that whispered it through country club memberships, charity galas, and an address that made people raise their eyebrows in respect. My father ran a successful investment firm. My mother chaired 3 different nonprofit boards. And my younger sister, Aurora, well, she was the golden child. Beautiful in that effortless way that made people stop and stare, charming in her social interactions. And most importantly, she was doing everything right according to our parents' playbook. She was dating men from the right families, planning the right kind of wedding, living the right kind of life. I was the anomaly, the daughter who locked herself in her room to code instead of attending garden parties, the one who chose MIT over staying local to be closer to family, the one who talked about neural networks instead of interior design. My mother used to sigh heavily whenever I came home for holidays, her disappointment so thick you could practically see it hanging in the air between us. My father would pat my shoulder absently and ask when I planned to do something practical with my degree. And Aurora would roll her eyes whenever I tried to share my achievements, as if my passion was nothing more than an inconvenient quirk she had to tolerate. But I kept trying. God, I kept trying so hard to make them see me, to make them proud. I sent them updates about my research. I invited them to presentations. I forwarded them articles about the AI projects I was working on. The responses were always the same brief, polite, distant. That's nice, dear. Sounds complicated. Your sister got engaged, by the way. Everything came to a head during my final year at MIT. I had been selected as the student speaker for the graduation ceremony. Not just any speaker, but the one who would represent our entire class of brilliant minds. It was an honor I had worked 5 years to earn. I had poured my soul into the research that earned me this recognition, survived countless sleepless nights pushed through imposter syndrome and self-doubt, all while watching my family celebrate Aurora's every minor social victory as if she'd won a Nobel Prize. I called my mother the day I found out about the speaking honor. My hands were shaking as I dialed. I was so excited, so desperate for her to finally see that what I had been doing mattered, that I mattered. She answered on the third ring, her voice distracted. I told her the news, my words tumbling over each other in my enthusiasm. There was a pause. Then she said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Listen, I need to call you back. We're in the middle of planning Aurora's engagement party." I should have known then. The warning signs had always been their bright red flags I had trained myself to ignore. But I pushed forward. I sent them the date, the time, the location. I sent them the draft of my speech. I told them how much it would mean to have them there. My mother responded with a short text, "We'll see what we can do." 2 weeks before graduation, Aurora announced that she and her fiancé Bradley had chosen a date for their engagement party. My mother called me, her voice bright with excitement, to tell me all about the venue they had booked, the caterers they had hired, the dress Aurora had picked out. I listened, waiting for the right moment to remind her about my graduation. When I finally mentioned it, there was silence. Then my mother said, "Oh, honey, didn't I tell you Aurora's engagement party is the same day? We've already put down deposits. Surely you understand that these things are so hard to reschedule." I sat in my tiny apartment in Cambridge, phone pressed to my ear, and felt something crack inside my chest. "Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "this is my graduation. From MIT. I'm the student speaker. This is the biggest moment of my academic life." "I know, dear," she replied, and I could hear her reorganizing papers in the background, not even giving me her full attention for this conversation. "And we're very proud of you. But Aurora's engagement party has been planned for months. Everyone who matters will be there. You know how important first impressions are for Bradley's family. Besides, graduations happen every year. How often does your baby sister get engaged? You're choosing an engagement party over my graduation." It wasn't a question. It was me finally accepting a truth I had been avoiding my entire life. "Don't be dramatic, Alara. We're not choosing anything. We simply have a prior commitment. You'll have your moment another time. Now I really need to go. The florist is calling." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there for 2 hours, staring at the wall of my apartment, watching the sunlight move across the floor. That's when it hit me. I had spent my entire life waiting for a moment that would never come. A moment when my achievements would matter as much as Aurora's social victories. A moment when they would choose me. The day of my graduation arrived with cruel, perfect weather. Bright sunshine, gentle breeze, the kind of day that belonged in a movie about triumph and family pride. I put on my cap and gown alone in my apartment. I walked to the ceremony alone. I sat in the designated speaker section, surrounded by other students whose families had arrived hours early to get good seats, and I scanned the crowd one final time, knowing what I would find, but unable to stop myself from looking. Empty seats. Hundreds of families, but none of them mine. When they called my name and I walked up to that podium, I carried every single moment of neglect with me. Every dismissed achievement, every interrupted story about my research, every time Aurora's trivial social engagement had overshadowed my academic victories. I delivered my speech about artificial intelligence and human potential, about pushing boundaries and refusing to accept limitations. I talked about the researchers who worked in obscurity driven not by recognition, but by the pure love of discovery. And as I spoke, I made a promise to myself I would never again seek their approval. I would never again dim my light to make them comfortable. I would succeed so brilliantly, so undeniably, that my absence from their lives would be their loss, not mine. After the ceremony, I stood in the crowd of celebrating families watching parents embrace their children with pride. My phone buzzed, a text from Aurora. "Hope your little speech went well. Mom says the engagement party is amazing. Bradley's parents love everything. Wish you could have been here." I didn't respond. Instead, I turned off my phone, went back to my apartment, and made a decision that would define the next 5 years of my life. I deleted their numbers. I changed my email address. I moved without telling them where I was going. I took a position with a tech startup in San Francisco, far enough away that accidental encounters would be impossible. And I poured every ounce of hurt, anger, and determination into building something they could never diminish or ignore. The first year was the hardest. I would wake up sometimes reaching for my phone to call my mother before remembering that I had chosen to cut that thread. Holidays were lonely. My birthday passed without the obligatory card from my father or the generic gift basket from my mother. But slowly, painfully, I began to build a new life. A life where my value wasn't determined by their attention or lack thereof. I threw myself into work with a singular focus. The startup I joined was developing AI solutions for healthcare diagnostics. I became the lead researcher, then the head of the AI division, and within 3 years, the chief technology officer. My work was featured in technology journals. I spoke at conferences. I built a reputation in the industry as someone who could solve problems others deemed impossible. And when the company went public, the stock options I had been granted made me financially independent in a way I had never imagined possible. By the time I turned 28, I had everything I had ever worked for. A corner office with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge, a penthouse apartment in Pacific Heights, a career that challenged and fulfilled me, respect from my peers, and most importantly, the unshakable knowledge that I had built this life entirely on my own terms, without their support, without their approval, without them. I had also perfected the art of not thinking about them. I avoided social media where I might accidentally see updates about Aurora's perfect wedding or my mother's charity events. I declined invitations to events where I might encounter people from their social circle. I built walls so high that not even memories could climb over them. Or so I thought. Then, 2 months before my 29th birthday, I received an invitation that changed everything. My cousin Maya was getting married. Sweet, kind Maya, who had always been caught in the middle of family dynamics, who had apologized to me after my graduation, even though it wasn't her fault. She had tracked me down through professional networks and sent me a personal email not through my family but directly to me. "I know things have been complicated," she wrote. "But you're my cousin, and I would really love for you to be there. No pressure, no expectations, just an invitation from someone who has always admired you." I stared at that invitation for 3 days. Going meant facing them. Going meant walking back into a world I had deliberately left behind. Going meant potentially reopening wounds I had spent 5 years carefully closing. But something in Maya's words, that simple acknowledgement that things had been complicated, that she admired me, made me reconsider. Not because I wanted reconciliation, not because I missed them, but because I realized something important. I wasn't the same person who had left. I wasn't the desperate girl seeking approval. I was a Laura Blackwood successful CEO, industry leader woman who had built an empire from nothing. And maybe it was time they knew exactly what they had missed. I RSVP'd, yes, and then I began planning. The day of Maya's wedding arrived with the same kind of cruel, perfect weather as my graduation had 5 years earlier. I chose my outfit carefully, a simple black cocktail dress that spoke of understated elegance and power, a watch that cost more than my parents had spent on Aurora's engagement party, heels that added 3 inches to my height, making me impossible to overlook. I did my makeup with precision, styled my hair into a sleek, low bun, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was confident, composed, and entirely in control. I barely recognized her as the girl who had once begged for scraps of her parents' attention. The wedding was held at a 5-star hotel downtown, exactly the kind of venue the Blackwood family favored. Old money elegance, crystal chandeliers, waiters in white gloves circulating with champagne. I arrived deliberately late after the ceremony when the cocktail hour was in full swing. I wanted to make an entrance. I wanted them to see me when they were surrounded by their society friends, when they were comfortable and complacent in their perfect little world. The moment I walked through those doors, I felt the shift in the room. Conversations paused mid-sentence, heads turned, and there, across the elegant reception hall, I saw them. My father distinguished in his tuxedo holding court, with a group of business associates. My mother, immaculate in champagne-colored silk, her hand on Aurora's arm. And Aurora herself, stunning in a bridesmaid dress, showing off an enormous diamond ring to a cluster of admiring women. They froze. My mother's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. My father's smile solidified into something resembling shock. Aurora's eyes widened, and for just a moment, her carefully maintained composure cracked to reveal something that looked almost like fear. I didn't rush over to them. I didn't smile and pretend that 5 years of silence hadn't happened. Instead, I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, took a slow sip, and let my gaze travel across the room with deliberate casualness, as if they were just another group of wedding guests no more significant than anyone else in attendance. Then I turned away and walked toward the bar, my heels clicking with perfect confidence against the marble floor. I felt, rather than saw, my mother approach. Years of living with her had taught me to sense her presence, that particular energy she carried when she was trying to maintain control of a situation that was slipping away from her. "Elara," she said, her voice pitched low but with that same edge of command I remembered so well. "What a surprise! When did you get into town?" I turned slowly, taking another sip of champagne before responding. "A few days ago. I had some business meetings in the area." It was a lie, but a useful one. Let her think I had been here in her city and hadn't bothered to contact her. "You should have called." Her smile was tight, her eyes scanning my face as if trying to reconcile the daughter she remembered with the woman standing before her. "We would have loved to see you." "Would you?" The question hung in the air between us, sharp and challenging. "I seem to remember the last time I asked to see you there was a scheduling conflict." Her face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Darling, that was years ago. Surely you're not still upset about that. You know how hectic things were with Aurora's engagement." "I'm not upset at all, Mother." I kept my voice perfectly pleasant, perfectly controlled. "I'm simply stating a fact. You chose Aurora's engagement party over my graduation. You made your priorities clear. I simply learned to adjust my expectations accordingly." Before she could respond, my father materialized at her elbow, his hand reaching for my arm in that patronizing way he had always touched me, as if I were still a child who needed guidance. "Now, Elara, let's not make a scene. This is Maya's special day." I stepped back just enough that his hand grasped empty air. "I have no intention of making a scene, Father. I simply came to celebrate Maya's wedding, just like you came to celebrate Aurora's engagement while I graduated from MIT. We all have our priorities, don't we?" Aurora approached, then her expression a mixture of annoyance and something else I couldn't quite identify. Insecurity, perhaps. "Elara," she said, her voice carrying that syrupy sweetness she used when she wanted something. "It's been so long. You look different." "Success tends to change a person," I replied, meeting her gaze directly. "But then you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Last I heard you were still living off Father's generosity." The barb hit its mark. Aurora's perfectly made-up face flushed. "That's not fair. I've been building my lifestyle brand." "A lifestyle brand," I repeated, unable to keep the amusement from my voice. "How entrepreneurial. Tell me, does Father's investment firm fund that, or is it Mother's nonprofit connections that provide your brand with opportunities?" "You've always been jealous of me," Aurora hissed, abandoning her sweet tone. "Always so bitter that people actually like me." "Jealous?" I laughed, a genuine sound that drew more attention from nearby guests. "Aurora, I'm the CTO of a company worth $300 million. I own property in San Francisco that costs more than the trust fund Father set up for you. I speak at international conferences about work that will change the future of medicine. What exactly would I be jealous of your ability to spend someone else's money on expensive brunches?" The look on her face was worth every single moment of pain I had endured. My mother tried to intervene, her voice sharp with warning. "Elara Blackwood, that is enough." "No, Mother, it's really not." I was just getting started, and the anger I had suppressed for 5 years was finally finding its voice. "But you're right about one thing. This is Maya's day, not mine. So why don't we all just pretend to be the perfect family you've always wanted? You can introduce me to your society friends as the daughter who went to MIT. You can leave out the part where you didn't bother to attend my graduation. That way everyone can keep their illusions intact. I walked away before any of them could respond, my heart pounding but my head held high. I found Maya near the dance floor, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Elara, you made it." She hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I let myself relax into the embrace of someone who genuinely cared about me. "I wouldn't have missed it," I told her honestly. "You look absolutely beautiful." "Thank you for coming," Maya said, her voice sincere. "I know it must have been hard with everything that happened." "It was the right decision," I assured her. And then, lowering my voice, I added, "Would you mind if I said a few words during the toasts? I promise it will be appropriate for the occasion." Maya's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "Of course. Actually, David and I would be honored." David, Maya's new husband, joined us then. He was an architect successful in his own right, and I had read about some of his projects in industry publications. "Elara Blackwood," he said, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "I've been following your work in AI diagnostics. The paper you published on pattern recognition in early-stage cancer detection was groundbreaking." It was such a simple thing having someone acknowledge my work, understanding what I did, and respecting it. But coming from a virtual stranger at my cousin's wedding, it hit differently than it might have otherwise. "Thank you." I managed, feeling an unexpected lump in my throat. "That means a lot." We talked for a few minutes about technology and innovation, about the intersection of architecture and AI, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the simple pleasure of being valued for my mind, my work, my actual contributions to the world. This was what I had been missing from my family, this basic recognition of who I was and what I had accomplished. When the time came for toasts, Maya's father went first, telling heartwarming stories about Maya's childhood. Then David's best man shared amusing anecdotes about their friendship, and then Maya took the microphone and smiled directly at me. "And now I'd like to invite my cousin Elara to say a few words. Elara, come on up." The room fell silent as I made my way to the small stage. I could see my parents near the front, their faces masks of apprehension. Aurora stood slightly behind them, her arms crossed defensively. I took the microphone, looked out at the sea of faces, and smiled. "Thank you, Maya and David, for this honor." I began, my voice steady and clear. "Today is about love, commitment, and the beginning of a beautiful journey together. But it's also about family, about the people who show up for the moments that matter. And that's what I want to talk about today." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle over the room. 5 years ago, I stood on another stage about to deliver what was then the most important speech of my life. I was the student speaker at my MIT graduation, representing my class, talking about the future of artificial intelligence and human potential. I had worked my entire academic life for that moment. I had sacrificed sleep, social life, and countless other opportunities to earn that honor. And I stood on that stage looking out at a sea of proud families, except the seats where my family should have been were empty. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I could see my mother's face turning crimson. My father had gone very still. Aurora was looking at the floor. They had made a choice that day. I continued, my voice growing stronger. They chose to attend my sister's engagement party instead. Not her wedding, mind you, her engagement party. Because apparently that was more important than watching their daughter achieve something she had worked 5 years to accomplish. "Elara, please," my mother said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I ignored her. But here's what I learned from that experience. I learned that the absence of support doesn't have to mean the absence of success. I learned that the people who should love you unconditionally aren't always capable of that kind of love. I learned that sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is showing you exactly who they are so you can stop wasting time trying to earn their approval. The room was completely silent now, every eye on me. In the 5 years since that graduation, I built a company. I earned a reputation in my field. I created a life that I'm proud of. I did all of that without their support, without their encouragement, without them. And the remarkable thing is, I did it better than I ever could have if I had been constantly seeking their validation, constantly making myself smaller to fit into their narrow definition of success. I finally looked directly at my parents. "So this toast isn't just for Maya and David, though I wish you both every happiness. This toast is for everyone here who has ever felt invisible in their own family. For everyone who has been told their dreams are less important than someone else's party. For everyone who has had to choose between seeking approval and seeking success. My advice is this: choose yourself. Choose your dreams. Choose your own definition of success, because the people who truly love you will show up. They will be there for your milestones, not just when it's convenient, but when it matters. And if they can't do that, then their absence is teaching you something valuable, even if it hurts like hell to learn it. I raised my glass. To Maya and David, may you always show up for each other. May you celebrate each other's victories. May you never let anyone feel invisible. And may your love be the kind that sees people for who they are and values them accordingly. Cheers. The room erupted in applause. Not polite golf clapping, but genuine thunderous applause. Several people stood up. I saw tears on Maya's face as she rushed forward to hug me. David was applauding enthusiastically, his eyes bright with respect. And when I looked at my parents, I saw exactly what I had hoped to see. Humiliation, recognition, and the dawning realization that I had publicly, eloquently, and undeniably called them out for their failures. My mother tried to approach me immediately after I stepped down from the stage, but I was surrounded by people wanting to talk to me, to thank me, to share their own stories of family disappointment and ultimate triumph. Women told me about parents who had dismissed their careers. Men talked about families who had mocked their unconventional paths. Everyone seemed to have a story of being underestimated, and everyone seemed grateful that I had given voice to their experiences. Through the crowd, I saw Aurora standing alone, her face a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite read. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered every disparaging comment, every eye roll, every time she had made me feel small for caring about things she deemed unimportant. My sympathy evaporated. When my mother finally managed to push through the crowd to reach me, her face was a mask of barely controlled fury. "How dare you?" she hissed, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "How dare you humiliate us like that in front of everyone we know?" I looked down at her hand on my arm, then slowly, deliberately removed it. "Humiliate you, Mother. I told the truth. If the truth humiliates you, perhaps you should examine your actions, not my words." "You selfish, ungrateful child," she spat. "After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me." I could feel the anger rising, 5 years of suppressed hurt threatening to overflow. "You paid for my education and then never asked about my classes. You supported me financially and then never showed up emotionally. You gave me a home and then made me feel homeless in it. Please, Mother, enlighten me. What exactly have you done for me besides provide the bare minimum legal requirements of parenthood?"
"We gave you opportunities."
My father interjected, his voice low and angry.
"We sent you to the best schools. We opened doors for you."
"No, Father. You opened doors for Aurora. You made introductions for her, set up internships for her, used your connections to launch her ridiculous lifestyle brand. For me, you wrote a check and then acted like your obligation was fulfilled. Well, congratulations. Your money did help me. It helped me get an education that I used to build something you couldn't buy or control. And now that I've succeeded without your involvement, without your approval, you're angry because you can't take credit for it." Aurora approached, then her face red and blotchy from crying. "You've always been so cruel," she said, her voice breaking. "So cold. Mom and Dad were just trying to support my dreams too." "Your dreams." I turned to her, and all the anger I had carried for years crystallized into cold, hard clarity. "Aurora, your dream is to be photographed at expensive restaurants and call it a career. My dream was to develop technology that could save lives. Your dream requires our parents' money and connections. Mine required intelligence, dedication, and years of hard work. We are not the same. Our dreams are not equally valid. And the fact that they chose to prioritize your party over my graduation tells me everything I need to know about what they actually value." I reached into my clutch and pulled out an envelope slightly worn from where I had carried it with me for 5 years. "This is the speech I gave at my MIT graduation," I said, holding it out to Aurora. "The one you said was a waste of time compared to your engagement party. Read it. Maybe you'll learn something about what actual achievement looks like." Or maybe you won't. Either way, I don't particularly care anymore. Aurora took the envelope with shaking hands, and I felt a surge of satisfaction so intense it was almost frightening. This was what I had come for, not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but this moment of absolute clarity where they could no longer pretend that I was the problem, that I was the difficult one, that I was somehow in the wrong for wanting basic recognition and respect. I turned to walk away, but my mother grabbed my arm again. Alara, please, we can talk about this. We can fix this. No, Mother, we can't. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the powerful society matriarch she tried to project, but a small, scared woman who had just realized she had lost something valuable and had no idea how to get it back. You had 5 years to reach out, 5 years to apologize, 5 years to even acknowledge that you had made a mistake. Instead, you did nothing. You didn't call, didn't write, didn't even attempt to find out if I was okay. Your silence told me everything I needed to know. And now that I've publicly called you out, now that your friends have seen exactly what kind of parents you are, suddenly, you want to talk. I'm not interested in damage control, Mother. I'm interested in living my life without the constant weight of your disappointment. I pulled my arm free and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name. My father's deeper voice trying to calm her down, Aurora sobbing loudly. But I didn't turn around. I had said what I came to say. I had shown them exactly what they had lost. And more importantly, I had shown everyone else in that room that it was possible to survive rejection from the people who were supposed to love you most and not just survive, but thrive. The next morning, I woke up to my phone exploding with notifications. The wedding had been covered by society pages as events involving prominent families often were, but that wasn't what was trending. Someone had recorded my toast, not just recorded it, but posted it online, and it had gone viral. Within 12 hours, the video had been viewed over 5 million times. The comments were overwhelming. Thousands of people sharing their own stories of family rejection, parental favoritism being the invisible child. Hashtags started forming. Unseen daughter began trending. Women's empowerment groups were sharing the video. Lifestyle bloggers were writing think pieces about family dynamics and conditional love. My inbox filled with interview requests. Major news outlets wanted to talk to me about family expectations and personal success. Women's magazines wanted to feature me in their profiles of inspiring leaders. Technology journals were interested in the intersection of personal adversity and professional achievement. And in the middle of all this media chaos, I received 3 messages. The first was from my mother. Look what you've done. You've destroyed our reputation. Everyone is talking about us. How could you do this to your own family? The second was from Aurora. I read your speech. I don't understand half of it, but I guess it's impressive. Whatever. You still ruined Maya's wedding with your drama. The third was from my father. We need to discuss how to manage this situation. The firm is getting calls. Please call me back immediately. I deleted all 3 without responding. They were still thinking about themselves, about their reputations, about damage control. Not once did any of them say they were sorry. Not once did they acknowledge that they had hurt me. They were exactly who I had always known them to be, and seeing it so clearly was both painful and liberating. Instead of responding to them, I focused on the opportunities coming my way. MIT reached out to ask if I would be the keynote speaker for their upcoming Women in Technology Innovation Conference. Major tech companies wanted me to speak at their diversity and inclusion events. A publisher inquired about a potential book deal. And most importantly, hundreds of young women reached out to tell me that my words had given them the courage to stop seeking approval from people who would never give it. 2 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of MIT preparing to deliver that keynote speech. The auditorium was packed. 3,000 people had registered, and the overflow rooms were full. I had spent the past 2 weeks refining my message, thinking about what I wanted to say not just to the audience in front of me, but to all those invisible daughters watching online, all those people who had ever felt less than in their own families. As I stood backstage doing a final check of my appearance in the mirror, my phone buzzed. Another message, this time from a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar. San Francisco. My parents had somehow gotten a new number and tracked me down. The message was from my mother, and it was longer than her usual curt texts. Ilara, please. We're here. We're outside in the lobby. We flew in this morning. We want to talk to you. We're your family. We love you. Please give us a chance to explain to make things right. Please. I stood there, phone in hand, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no hurt, no residual longing for their approval. Just a calm, settled certainty about who I was and what I wanted. They had finally shown up, but they were years too late and present for all the wrong reasons. They weren't here because they had realized they were wrong. They were here because I had publicly embarrassed them because their social standing had taken a hit because people were asking them uncomfortable questions. The event coordinator knocked on the door.
Ms. Blackwood, we're ready for you.
I looked at my phone one last time at that message sitting there like a ghost of the past, trying to claw its way into my present. Then I powered off the phone completely and dropped it into my bag. I smoothed down my dress, checked my hair one final time, and walked toward the stage entrance. The coordinator briefed me as we walked. There are international live streams set up. We're expecting over 10 million viewers online in addition to the in-person audience. This is the biggest conference turnout we've had in 5 years. 5 years. Everything kept coming back to that number. 5 years since they had chosen not to show up. 5 years since I had chosen to stop waiting for them. The lights dimmed in the auditorium. The introduction began listing my credentials, my achievements, my contributions to the field of artificial intelligence. And then it was my turn. I walked out onto that stage and the applause was deafening. Thousands of faces looked up at me with respect, admiration, hope. These were my people. Not because we shared blood, but because we shared values, passion, dedication to something larger than ourselves. I stepped up to the podium, looked out at the audience, and smiled. This was my moment. Not the one 5 years ago that they had missed, but this one, the one I had built for myself through sheer determination and refusal to be diminished. Thank you all for being here, I began, and my voice was steady, strong, confident. Many of you have seen the video that went viral last week. You've heard about a graduation that happened 5 years ago, about a family that chose not to attend. Some of you have asked me how I moved forward from that moment. Others have shared your own stories of being unseen, undervalued, dismissed. And I want to start today by telling you something important. Their absence didn't destroy me. It created me. I paused, letting the words sink in. When the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally demonstrate that their love has very specific conditions, you have 2 choices. You can spend your life trying to meet those conditions, twisting yourself into shapes that don't fit who you truly are, hoping that one day you'll finally be enough. Or you can accept that their inability to see your value is about them, not you, and you can build a life so authentic, so successful, so undeniably yours that their opinion becomes irrelevant. I could see people nodding, some wiping tears from their eyes. I chose the second path, and I'm not going to lie to you, it was hard. It's still hard sometimes. There are moments when I achieve something incredible and my first instinct is still to want to share it with my parents to see pride in their eyes. Old habits die hard. But then I remember I don't need their pride. I have my own. I don't need their approval. I have my own standards and I've met and exceeded them. I don't need them to show up. I showed up for myself. Behind me on the large screens, images began to play. My work, my research, the technologies I had helped develop. Patents with my name on them, awards I had received, articles written about my contributions to the field. It was a visual reminder of everything I had accomplished in those 5 years of silence. Today I stand before you not as someone's daughter, not as someone's sister, but as Dr. Ilara Blackwood, Chief Technology Officer, AI Researcher, Innovator. These are the identities I built for myself. And I want every person here, especially every young woman who has ever felt invisible, to know this. You don't need permission to be brilliant. You don't need approval to be successful. You don't need validation from people who have already demonstrated they can't see your value. My phone was still off in my bag, but I knew my mother's message was sitting there waiting. I knew they were somewhere in this building hoping for a reconciliation that would repair their damaged reputation. And in that moment, standing on this stage with thousands of people looking at me with respect and admiration, I made my final choice. Some stories don't need a sequel, I said, my voice ringing clear through the auditorium. Some doors once closed don't need to be reopened. Some relationships once broken aren't meant to be repaired, and that's okay. That's not failure. That's recognizing that your well-being, your peace of mind, your ability to thrive matters more than maintaining appearances or clinging to a connection that has only ever caused you pain. I could see the massive digital display behind me now showing live stream comments, thousands of them scrolling past. People sharing heart emojis, sharing their own stories, thanking me for giving voice to their experiences. This moment right here was worth more than any approval my parents could ever give me. 5 years ago, I stood on a graduation stage at this very institution alone in a crowd of celebrating families. I concluded. Today, I stand here surrounded by 3,000 people in this room and millions more watching online. The difference isn't just the size of the audience. The difference is that everyone here chose to show up. You chose to be present. You chose to value the work we do, the knowledge we share, the community we build together. And that choice, that presence means everything. The applause was thunderous. People stood a wave of bodies rising throughout the auditorium. I stood there absorbing the moment, feeling the validation that came not from family obligation, but from earned respect. This was what I had worked for. This was what mattered. After the speech, I was surrounded by people wanting to talk, to share, to connect. Industry leaders wanted to discuss collaborations. Students asked for advice. Other speakers wanted to share their own experiences of overcoming family rejection. I spent 3 hours in conversation, giving my full attention to each person because I knew what it felt like to speak to someone who was only half listening, who was already thinking about someone else somewhere else. Eventually, the crowd thinned. Maya found me near the exit. "That was incredible," she said, hugging me tightly. "You were incredible." "Thank you for giving me the opportunity," I told her. "Your wedding was the catalyst I needed." "Your aunt and uncle are still here," she said carefully. "They've been waiting in the lobby since before your speech started. Aurora is with them too. They want to talk to you." I looked toward the lobby entrance. Part of me was curious. Part of me wondered if my speech, if the viral video, if all of this public reckoning had actually changed them, made them understand what they had done. But a larger, wiser part of me knew better. "Can you tell them something for me?" I asked Maya. "Of course. Tell them I hope they enjoyed the speech. Tell them it was everything my graduation speech would have been if they had bothered to attend. Tell them I'm done waiting for them to see me because I've already been seen by everyone who matters. And tell them that some lessons are best learned through absence. I learned how to succeed without them. Maybe now they can learn how to exist without me." Maya nodded understanding in her eyes. "You're really not going to talk to them?" "There's nothing left to say," I replied honestly. "They're sorry they got caught. Sorry their reputation took a hit. Sorry that people are judging them. But they're not sorry for what they did to me. And I've spent 5 years learning that I don't need their sorry. I just need them to be absent from my life so I can continue thriving without their toxicity." I left through a side exit, avoiding the lobby entirely. My driver was waiting, and as we pulled away from MIT, I felt a sense of completion. Not closure exactly, because some wounds don't close neatly, but completion. I had come full circle. I had returned to the place where they had failed to show up, and I had shown up for myself so spectacularly that their absence became just another footnote in my success story. That evening alone in my hotel room, I finally turned my phone back on. The messages flooded in. My mother, my father, Aurora, all of them increasingly desperate, increasingly angry, increasingly revealing their true priorities. Not once did anyone say, "I'm sorry I hurt you." Instead, it was all about how I had hurt them, how I had embarrassed them, how I had been cruel and vindictive and ungrateful. I read every message. Then I blocked their numbers, not out of anger, but out of clarity. They had taught me an invaluable lesson. Some people will never change, and waiting for them to grow, to understand, to suddenly become who you needed them to be all along is a waste of the one life you have to live. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to all the young people who had reached out to me over the past weeks. I wanted to tell them what I had learned, what I knew to be true, that being unseen by your family is painful, but it doesn't define your worth. that sometimes the people who should love you most are incapable of that kind of love, and it's not your job to fix them or teach them or wait for them to figure it out. That building a life that makes you proud is the best revenge, not because it hurts them, but because it frees you. Looking back on everything, the question isn't whether I should have tried harder to maintain the relationship with my family. The question is why I spent so long trying to earn love that should have been freely given, and the answer to that question changed my life. I spent so long trying because I was taught that family was everything, that blood was thicker than water, that you should never give up on the people who raised you. But here's what they don't tell you in all those heartwarming family reunion movies. Sometimes family isn't everything. Sometimes blood is just blood. Sometimes the people who raised you are the people you need to raise yourself above. And sometimes giving up on trying to fix a broken relationship is the bravest thing you can do. So here's my truth. My final statement on the matter: I chose myself. I chose my peace, my success, my authentic life over their conditional approval. And it was the right choice. It is still the right choice. Every time I achieve something new, every time I stand on a stage and share my work, every time I look in the mirror and see a woman I'm proud of, I know it was the right choice. They wanted me to be smaller, quieter, more conventional, more grateful for the scraps of attention they threw my way. They wanted me to smile politely when Aurora's engagement announcement interrupted my research presentation at family dinner. They wanted me to nod and say, "That's nice," when my mother spent an hour detailing the guest list for a charity gala, but couldn't spare 5 minutes to ask about my thesis. They wanted me to accept that my accomplishments would always be footnotes in the story of Aurora's social calendar. Instead, I became bigger, louder, more revolutionary, more grateful for the people who actually showed up without being asked, without needing to be convinced of my worth. I became the woman who spoke at conferences while they attended cocktail parties. I became the CEO who built companies while they built social connections. I became the person who measured success by impact and innovation, not by how many country club members knew my name. And most importantly, I became someone who knew the difference between people who loved me and people who loved the idea of controlling me. Have you ever had to choose between your family's approval and your own happiness? Have you ever walked away from people you loved because staying was slowly killing who you were meant to be? That's the question I want to leave you with. Because if my story has taught you anything, I hope it's this: you deserve to be seen valued and celebrated by the people in your life. And if they can't do that, then you deserve the courage to walk away and build a life with people who can. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever had to choose yourself over people who didn't choose you, then hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about taking back your power. Leave a comment below and tell me, what would you do if you were in my position? Would you have given them another chance, or would you have done what I did? I want to hear your stories, your experiences, your truths, because every voice matters, especially the ones that were told to stay quiet for too long.